TikTok usually. Yeah, I'm a big I'm big on TikTok these days. Yeah, no, of course, all the usuals.
Hello and welcome to episode 84 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is for marketing and the F is for, well, you decide. As you're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott, and this weekly podcast serves as my excuse to chat with marketing friends old and new that I've met through my career as a marketing leader and trusted advisor, and hopefully share with you some marketing street knowledge that we've picked up along the way that could bring out the Rockstar CMO in you. Come say hello. We are Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn. This episode was recorded on Friday, the 15th of October. Thank you for joining us. I hope you've had a good week and you are well, safe, and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. This week, Jeff and I will continue on the topic of procuring marketing technology and discuss gathering requirements. I meet Ilaria Severi, Head of Marketing Communications at Create the Clicks, and I wind down for the weekend with my friend Robert Rose in the Rockstar CMO Virtual Bar. Right, let's get started, shall we? On to our first segment with my chum, Jeff Clark, Rockstar CMO advisor and former research director at Serious Decisions Forrester, as he shares how to gather requirements for that missing piece of marketing technology that you crave. Welcome back, Jeff, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you, my friend?
I am doing well. We're having a warm fall day, and it feels almost a little bit like summer here. So enjoying last little bit of warmth before we hit the depths.
Nice. Yeah. Here's a blue sky day today. I flew back from a trip this morning, and I arrived home to blue sky, having been in blue sky in Spain.
It's a week for blue sky.
Yeah, and it was beautiful. Landing it was beautiful, and so yeah, as we edge towards the end of having anything beautiful and blue skies, as you say. Mind you, the leaves are turning, aren't they, up your way?
They are.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I was up in Vermont earlier this week, and I saw kind of at peak in the middle of the state, and it is really pretty on another beautiful clear day. Mm-hmm. So nothing like a beautiful clear day with the fall colors we get here in New England.
Yeah, no, I love it up there when the fall colours come. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about, the weather and things. We're here to talk about marketing. And the last few weeks, we've been on a bit of a roll. So we were talking about assessing the tech stack and understanding what it is that we need. And then last week, when we found that shiny thing we really want, how do we make the business case for it? And then this week, I believe we're going to talk about gathering requirements. What say you, Jeff?
Well, this has to be the most exciting of all of the topics in MarTech.
Well, let the listeners.
And I do say that in jest. But it is, as you're sort of going through the progression we were on, so you think about, okay, so I made the business case that I can go buy that new content marketing platform or whatever it is. And it's like, now I got to go buy it. And hopefully one of the things I didn't do as I was making my business case is I locked myself into like a solution, a vendor, because then as you get into the details of requirements, you may find that you need to do something else. But I mean, we covered a lot of that territory in terms of understanding where your gaps are and kind of building that business case. And a lot of the requirement building should actually happen, in consort with that. But still, I mean, this is another milestone of actually putting those things together for whether you're trying to get a proof of concept, whether you're trying to get RFIs, requests for information, RFQs, whatever. You want to have the details together. So so there's a number of ways to address this, but before I do that, I want to get the really boring stuff out of the way, which is that first, one of the things you need to know kind of like system level requirements. You need to know finance requirements. So these are things that are probably not dependent on what you're buying. There'd be certainly something to depend on what you're buying, but you want to make sure like IT will have a number of kind of governance issues about security, privacy, if anything's touching customers or customer data, or how are we doing in terms of making sure we meet the privacy guidelines, hosting considerations, are we hosting it in our internal systems and the cloud, hybrid, whatever. And then finance will have its requirements, payment terms, prove vendor status, if it's capital expense, how's that handled? And I don't want to go to detail on any of that stuff because it's pretty, for one, it's pretty dry. But secondly, it's one of those things that you just go to the person in finance and say, what do I need to know or what do I need to know from my vendors before we go forward? Go to IT. What do I need to know before we start getting the details of this thing? So the three ways I was thinking, and this may not be, it'd be interesting if somebody has another approach. But in the work that I was doing at Forrester and Serious Decisions, there were a number of ways that we would work with clients on helping them go through this, and I'll just quickly rattle off. One is like, sort of taking a business requirements or capabilities focus and kind of go from high level down to detail level, as you're talking to stakeholders. Another way would be to take a process view. So I'm going to, work through a workflow from beginning to end, and then determine what the requirements are as I go through each of the steps. And then similarly, you could take kind of the exact same flow process, but doing data. So what are the data's in? What if I have the solution? What data do I need coming in? What am I trying to put out? And where does some of that data go? So you can take a data flow approach. And these are not. One of the things is that they're not mutually exclusive, because one may lead you to another, and they all require that you interview stakeholders. Right. And stakeholders, I know, and in our discussions, we've mentioned stakeholders many times. Yeah. It's kind of a nebulous term. There could be other terms for it, but, decision makers, influencers, whatever. Yeah. But I think one of the things that is important to understand, and this, as we went back through the other discussions we had on assessing your stack and doing your business case, we came to the same issue of involving stakeholders. But it's kind of important at this point to make sure you've kind of categorized, or you think who are those major stakeholders. And so one would be an enterprise owner. So if I'm in marketing, my enterprise owner is the CMO, or VP of marketing. It's the person I report up to, and because they're the one that you want to go talk to and say, what do you think of requirements if we go, and I may keep coming back to like this concept of a content marketing platform. So what do you want to make sure we get out of it? And they may be all about measuring effectiveness of content, or we're all about improving productivity of the team. So we have those things in mind. The other person you want to make sure you contact early is who the customer is, and the customer typically is an internal customer. It could be somebody external if this is an application which is particularly you're going to touch some of your customers, like an event registration or something. But oftentimes in marketing, your customer is a head of sales, because you're doing things that are ultimately creating demand or creating brand impression that makes it easier for salespeople to do their job. So, and it's obviously isn't the case for everybody. And actually, some of your, like if you're doing a content marketing platform, and maybe a lot of the content is developed by a product marketing team or a product management team that is in the product group. Yeah, that might be one, if not all, your only internal customer.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the other thing is you want to make sure you talk to a process owner or a function owner. So if I'm in marketing operations or marketing IT role, and we're talking about customer or a content marketing system, then who owns content marketing? Is that the head of Marcoms? Is there a content marketing director or VP?
Just asking that question might expose a different problem. Who owns the content?
Yeah, really. Yes. Well, and if that problem has not been wrestled to the ground, then you've got to
you shouldn't be getting a
wrestle
content
to the
marketing
ground.
platform.
Yeah, really. Well, that's yes.
So
enough said there.
Yeah. So you've got your enterprise stakeholder. You've got your internal customer you're going to talk to. It's a functional and a process person. Who else were you saying we also need to work with?
There are going to be various actors in the process. So when I worked at Pega, when we were diagramming processes, the individuals or sometimes the systems were the actors. So who touches it? And if we go back to our content marketing example, then it's like, okay, somebody is an originator of messaging and direction and objectives, and somebody's an originator of content, and then it goes on to somebody who actually designs and puts the pieces and parts together, and then somebody posts, and so you
these are the
want to make
users,
sure you touch. Analogous to the users. Yep.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily. It doesn't mean that you talk to everybody, but you certainly. One of the things is that, in my experience, it was that you kind of start at the top and work your way down. You do get to a point where you can say, I think I've covered all the bases, and I don't need to talk to everyone in the creative team or everyone on the web team who's going to be making sure they know where this content is going, or sales ops if it's going to a sales enablement tool.
And how do you find that? How do you find that point? I mean, because when we talk about requirements, I often cast my mind back to when I was in pre-sales, and we get an RFP from when I worked for a vendor, and you get an RFP come through, and it would say stupid stuff like "must be easy to use." Must be intuitive. It's like tick. So how do you get to that point where you feel like you've spoken to everybody that you need, and those requirements are now, that you've got the right level of requirements that's going to brief a vendor properly?
Well, I think so. If we take one of the paths that I mentioned, I think that's where you can determine whether you've done the right level of investigation among these various actors or stakeholders in the system. So if you think about it from a capability perspective, and you start with a high level list of capabilities, and one of the things I did was build a set of business requirements. We often call them capabilities, kind of interchangeable, for marketing resource management systems. And so you kind of go through and say, okay, we need to create projects. We need to, somebody needs to approve the project. Somebody needs to assign resources. Somebody needs to develop the taxonomy for the projects. And, those are the various things that need to be done. And one of the things I did is I kind of developed a starter list of these business requirements. And then when you put it in the situation of the client, or then it's like, oh well, we also need to think about some of these other things that are specific to us. And so if you go through your interview process with these requirements in mind, then your stakeholders can start to give you input as to how it should work. And of course, one of the things you're trying to build, you mentioned the things that easy to use and intuitive, which are just like, well, of course, easy to use for somebody writing content might be different than easy to use for somebody who's a high level executive who's approving content, or easy to use for the designer who's got to pull a bunch of different assets together. So easy to use has to be viewed in the context of these particular
of the task. And so that's it. So you map out all the tasks that you want the solution to solve, and step through and get all of the stakeholders and what they're going to do in that process, and then gather from them what they need in that part of their process.
Correct. And what their expectations are, and what systems, and this becomes clear in some of the other paths for doing this, but what systems are they touching? And you definitely, you realize that only certain, I mean, if you developed a list of requirements that was like, 3 dozen long, not all those stakeholders have an opinion on all those. So it's like, you got to make sure you're targeting, in doing your interviewing with the stakeholders, you got to say, okay, these people can help me build out this part of our requirements, whereas this person can only help me build out, another part of it.
Right.
So the second path that I was thinking of was, or that I work with clients on, was following a process. And I think, back to our content marketing example, this is particularly good for content marketing because there's a definite workflow, right?
Yeah.
So, somebody has set goals and objectives, and maybe campaign themes or something that all the work gets aggregated under, and then you go through and you can map out the process, whether you're doing this on a whiteboard or you're doing it in a PowerPoint or a Visio, where you'd say, okay, first we have somebody who is writing original content, and then secondly we have somebody who is editing or who is revising for a particular audience, and then we move on into design, all the way through to when the content gets both activated to be live and when it gets archived for future use. And so each step you go, well, who owns that action? What data is required as an input? What data gets, or what process handoff is the output? So where's this thing going? Because then that will tell you, one, who's the next actor in the process, but also will tell you, are there other applications this needs to integrate with, which is, I mean, one of the critical things about understanding requirements is what else in the ecosystem or the MarTech stack is this thing interacting with. And if you don't, that's one of the things where you take a process or a data flow perspective, that's where all of a sudden you run into, oh, this needs to access our existing asset management system, or this needs to tie into an analytics application because we need to measure something, or and so that's a critical point. So there was the data in, there's the data out.
But this is interesting because this goes back to our conversation a couple of shows ago where we were talking about assessing needs. If you go through that list and that task step, then you may find you've already got tools that can help you with that part of the task, and that maybe an integration is going to be better than actually finding a tool that will duplicate that.
Yep. And matter of fact, this is one of the, I mean, I chose the content marketing platform example, but, one of the things that is a challenge for content marketing is that there are so many different tools out there which do different pieces of this puzzle. So asset management systems, there are workflow automation systems, there are, there's proofing systems, there's, so there's these various things, and then there are also these tools like a sales asset management or sales enablement tool that may actually offer a lot of the capabilities that you're looking for in your content marketing automation. So yeah, that's it. That's a great question, and that's really where going through this step by step is, and asking the question about what's currently used. Is it good, bad? What would you do differently? So the other couple of things you want to make sure you mention as you're going through this process flow are, what are the business rules? If somebody gets, and this is probably most easily depicted in a lead flow. I pick up a lead, and I'm my job. I'm in a business development rep. My job is to call this person. Okay, so at what point do I say this is ready to move on? At what point do I put it back for going through another campaign? At what point do I kill it? And so the business rules, and whether the system you are, going to acquire, does it have to be able to capture those business rules internally,
Mhm.
or is that and sometimes some of these things are done manually, but you just need to be aware of them.
Yeah.
Also, how are you going to measure success, which is where any integration with an analytics tool is helpful. So if I'm trying to
Yeah.
measure success in terms of productivity of this process, we're getting
Right.
more throughput, we're getting better
Right.
quality content, et cetera,
Right.
then that might be handled within the tool. But if I'm trying to
Yeah.
get to this content is creating greater engagement, it's
Mhm.
attached to more opportunities or leads, then I
Yeah.
need to integrate to another sort of performance analytics system.
Mhm.
So those are, I mean, the simple way to look at it is there's a step in a process, there's an input, there's an output.
Mhm.
How's it going to be measured as successful, and what kind of rules? Whoever's managing
Right.
this, what are the rules that they're working under?
Right. Right. So you would build that into the requirements then, what
Yeah,
success would look like. Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
because you could depict this in a couple of ways. I mean, one is you
Yeah.
could, as I said, if you go to Visio and you do a flow diagram and
Yeah.
you make some of these notes about the ins and outs and business rules, et cetera, as
Yeah.
notation on your flow diagram.
Yeah.
The other way we used to do it is you kind of build a chart where every action is a row in the chart, and all the
Mhm.
columns are
Mhm.
owner, input, output, business rules,
Yeah.
current technology,
Yeah.
how do we measure success, and you just kind of, and by that, when you put it into a chart and you detail it, it actually kind of makes it
Mm.
easy to say, here's the process we're going through, and here's all the details, and I
Yeah.
can extract out all of the integration tools, or I can extract
Yeah.
out of that table,
I like it, and you're
all the
really
data
sort of
in
just
and out.
yeah, you're really distilling that down then, aren't you, into something that's then much more manageable by doing that hard work, and you've then got that table. It's then really distilled down, and then you can build those requirements, and then your communication with your vendors is going to be much better, and also you'll find out because every organisation thinks they're different, don't they? And that's where your difference is going to be
Yes.
found, isn't it?
Yes, or where your lack of difference is going to be found.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is more often the case than not. But
Yes.
to that point, I mean, so many tools are, because the other thing you'll find is there's so many tools are out there that are really simple ways of addressing a
Hmm.
problem. And I
Hmm.
know in the area of marketing resource management or content,
Yeah.
workflow is that a lot of people would buy a really simple basic tool that was easy to
Yeah.
implement because they're all
Yeah.
out there. They get advertised on LinkedIn or
Yeah.
wherever,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like, wow, this looks like it'll do it. And then you
Hmm.
realize, it doesn't give you either the analytics you want, or
Yeah.
it doesn't integrate well with other systems,
Yeah.
or it's sometimes the licensing. I mean, this is, I think, one of the other challenges in content marketing is that there are a lot of people that have their hand in content. So am I
Yeah.
licensing it for every individual,
Yeah.
and in which case it might get expensive,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
am I licensing it for the team, for the company,
Yeah.
or the ways that I can determine that this is
Yeah, but I mean, like what you've just done, which is step through the process and have all the actors involved in that, then you get a sense of all of those things. You get the answers to all of those things, right?
yep,
And the other thing I think about requirements is, and just like realizing that we're running out of time is about time. Many organizations don't invest that time, do they?
no,
They don't realize that there's going to be a cost to buying a solution, and it's going to be on them, and they need to spend this time, and they need to do a proper evaluation because it's going to cost them a whole lot more when they get the wrong solution down the line. Yeah,
absolutely, and yeah, and it pays to do the due diligence. Also pays to understand what
yeah,
solutions and purchases are we doing this due diligence, because just like we said last week,
yeah,
there are certain types of tech that
yeah,
can be purchased, because whether it's because it's inexpensive, or because it doesn't
yeah,
really muck with our internal data or our
yeah,
processes, that it's just like we're not going
yeah,
to worry about it. But if
yeah,
something's really going to have an impact in the organization, then it's really important to do this.
yeah,
And without going into any detail, but on the third method is following the data, and it
uh-huh,
is just like following the process in terms
yeah,
of going through all the steps, but
Yeah.
rather than starting with the like a person-to-person workflow, you're just thinking about data. Because if you're buying analytics tools, et cetera, there may be one or two users, and so really what you're focused on is where is data coming from, how's it going to be used, how's it going to be output. So that's kind of the.
I like that too, and maybe a combination of the three, right? Is the people, the process, and the data, and you're mapping all that through, and that's what you're going to need to do with your integration. So I think that's really, really good advice, as usual, Jeff. Thank you very much.
People, process, technology, and data. It's a pretty simple equation.
Exactly. That's excellent. Thank you very much, Jeff. So I know that you've got some music choice for this week. What are you going with this week, Jeff?
Well, this is a new one. Usually, when I pick a music choice, it's something there's like something in my head that I've heard before. This is new, and technical requirements. There's not a lot in the catalog about it. But I did find something that I thought was appropriate. It's called "Technical Difficulties" from a band called Julian K. in their release in 2009 of "Death to Analog."
Wow.
And the problem that they were running into was nothing's working. And so, unfortunately, this kind of emphasizes the downside of not doing your due diligence, as opposed to last week when we talked about winning.
Yes.
But still, I think it's appropriate.
Well, I'll hit the listener with a bit of technical difficulties, and they'll play it on that. And if people want to get in touch with you, Jeff, and maybe need some help with their requirements gathering, where can they find you?
On Rockstar CMO Advisors, as well as under Jeff Clark in LinkedIn.
Nice. All right, mate. Now, I know that you're going to take another week off next week to do your climate change work. So I'll see you in a fortnight. Maybe your leaves will be being peaked, but full on peeping by then, won't they?
They will be. So it's actually an appropriate time to talk about change management.
Oh, change management. Splendid. So in 2 weeks' time, talk about change management. Sounds great.
Awesome. Take care.
All right. Yeah, see you then, Jeff. Cheers, bye-bye.
Record 700 days and ways. Inside is changing, mind is failing, eyes turning, eyes are burning, nothing's working.
Thank you, Jeff. And another new track for me, something quite different this week, and that was Technical Difficulties by Julian K. Of course, I'll include all the links Jeff referred to and a link to that tune in the show notes. If you have any thoughts on that discussion or have suggestions for what we should be discussing, you know where to go. Get in touch with Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn. Right, on to our guest. Ilaria Saveri is the head of marketing communications at Creative Clicks, a performance marketing agency in Amsterdam. Ilaria is an experienced marketer and communication strategist with a passion for helping brands understand the digital marketing world, build their own identity, and reach the desired audiences. Fluent in 5 languages, she is responsible for online and offline communication with all stakeholders, including social media management, employee branding, events organization, PR, and content marketing. We discussed the positives of traveling to events again as we connected at the next web event in Amsterdam, but I found a downside to travel this week as my travel condenser microphone failed for this interview, so the audio isn't as good as I'd like, but despite that, I hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome to Rockstar CMO FM, Ilaria. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much, Ian, for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
You're very welcome. And for listeners that don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Ilaria Saveri. I'm the head of marketing and communications at Creative Clicks. Mm-hmm. Creative Clicks, it's a company that was founded in Amsterdam, but we're now present in 4 continents, 5 different other cities. So besides Amsterdam, which is our HQ, we're also present in Tel Aviv, Beijing, San Francisco, and Toronto. So we're really active worldwide on a 24/7 base. Mm-hmm. Creative Clicks is a performance marketing agency, so we focus on performance and we're really data driven as a company. We've been in the market for over 10 years, so we have an extensive experience and in the performance marketing industry, which has changed a lot in the past decade. Like 10
Yeah.
years ago was totally different market.
Yeah.
And for me, as the head of marketing and communications, I'm responsible for the corporate communication of the company, all the events, the podcast, actually, because I'm also producing my own podcast, CC Talks. So if you guys want to know more about mobile performance marketing, social media, feel free to check it out on Spotify and Google and Apple Podcasts.
I'll include a link to it in the show notes as well.
That would be amazing. And we also help other divisions with content creation by our own studio. So we are also building our own in-house studio, which is actually growing little by little. So that's great. So lots of things going on, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're based in Amsterdam, you mentioned. But also, you know, as we're sort of getting to know each other, I noticed that you studied media and business. What inspired you to get into marketing?
Yeah, so actually, my background was a bit different because I studied languages and intercultural communication. So there was already communication part there, but it was more focused on the literature part and the culture part of languages and communication. Then I like times changed and social media started becoming like a big thing, and I saw potential there, and I really liked the new way of communicating. I always liked marketing, and I really like to see how the marketing combined with this new digital world, and I wanted to be part of that. So let's say that my passion for languages and cultural and communication kind of found a meaning when this could be channeled in social media, in marketing, in digital strategies. So that's when I decided to specialize in media business, and that's why I actually moved to the Netherlands from Italy. I already lived abroad in other countries, but at that time I was back in Italy, and I found this amazing program at Erasmus University in Rotterdam, which I loved, and that's how I landed into media business and now marketing.
Right. And you've stayed in the Netherlands ever since?
Yeah, correct. So since 2016, so it's been 5 years.
Yeah, nice. And so you're a relatively young marketer, well, compared to me and a lot of the people I talk to on the show. What advice would you give to young marketers who are trying to follow that same path that you're following? Because you're now head of marketing at an agency. You're getting building a nice career. What advice would you give to young marketers who want to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, I love the question because I always like to tell a bit about my story because I hope it can inspire people a little bit and give people that extra push that sometimes, especially young people, may not have. Although their dreams are big. And if the dreams are big, I always say they're possible, you know? Like I said, I come originally from Italy. I did travel a lot, but I come from a very humble family, and a lot of people in my family didn't even graduate from university. But this is to say that it doesn't matter where you start. It matters where you're headed to, where you want to go. And also for young people who want to become marketers, there are several paths you can take. Of course, having a master's degree nowadays, it's quite important. We cannot deny it. But everything you get, the experience that you have to make it for yourself. Because schools, it's a great starting point, but they don't really like school, to be really honest. University doesn't teach you how to work. Doesn't give you the work method, and also I think that we all have to be entrepreneurs of ourselves in a way. So we have to be the ones always searching for things, studying new things, and sometimes it is time consuming, but what you get out of it, it's much bigger. So definitely don't stop at the experience that you may or may not have. Build your own experience, network with people. Now there is this, people can see social media as a bad space in a way, and for certain things it certainly is, but for others it's an amazing place for networking as well. So use that as a networking tool. There are so many online classes, so you don't even have to attend certain courses. You can take even free courses online. Ask and talk with people that have more experience than you have, and ask them if they would like to be your mentors. And you would be amazed how many people would like to help you. In my own experience, I was lucky, but I also was always out there trying to find people who could also help me where I knew I was lacking skills or I was lacking knowledge,
Hmm.
and I found so many great people that are now that eventually even became friends, and people that I talk to when I have doubts about, you know,
Mm.
my work, when I have things like, how would you deal with this? Well, what's your
Yeah,
experience with that? It's
yeah,
amazing to have mentors. Mentors
yeah.
are really helpful.
Yeah. Well, I think I think as a marketer, you need to be constantly learning anyway. It doesn't matter where you are in your career because the
Indeed.
craft changes so much. And like you say, it's not something you can be taught like accountancy or something like that in university, and then you're set. It's going to constantly change. You need to be curious all the time, don't you?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Especially like in the digital world we're living in. Everything is changing from one day to
Yeah.
the other. So you really
Yeah.
have to be on point every day, and to do that you need to
Yeah. Yeah.
keep reading, keep searching, keep having
Yeah.
that hunger for knowledge. That's
Yeah.
the basis of everything, I believe.
Yeah, and that leads nicely onto my next question because what I wanted to talk to you about was the fact that you shared 10 business books that would help your business grow on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. And I'm a huge fan of marketing books. And actually,
Me
I
too.
recommend to everybody they should listen to the Marketing Book podcast by Douglas Burdett. So if you've not heard
Hmm.
that, you should listen to that. So every week he interviews an author every single week. So I'm always buying books. But how would you narrow that 10 books down to one? Would you choose one out of that list?
Yeah, I would, and that's the Start with Why by Simon Sinek. I think
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
book that every marketer
yeah,
should read. Not because it's well, some people call it the Bible of marketing. Well, maybe that's too much, but it still
yeah,
gives you a nice way of thinking and a
yeah,
structure. When you, for instance, as a marketing manager, you have to build a strategy. It's
yeah.
fundamental. So the circle, the golden circle that Simon Sinek talks about, starting from the
Hmm.
why, the what, and the how, it's fundamental. And every time that I am facing some doubts, or like I kind of, it can happen that as a marketer and you create so much content at some point
Yeah,
you have to step back and think again and say, yeah, but why
yeah,
am I doing this? What's my
yeah, yeah,
reason for doing this?
yeah, yeah,
And I find it also fascinating how he finds the why also not just related to marketing but to
yeah,
leaders, uh,
yeah,
and how actually it's so true. People don't sell, or companies don't sell products. They sell they sell a
yeah,
message. They sell a why.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. And when I started my marketing career, because I started in marketing fairly late, I
mhm.
learned through books, and I was recommended 5 books to read, and Start with Why was one of them. So I thought it was really
Right.
interesting that you also chose that book to be. It's that one, and there's a few other books. And what other authors do you like? Would you recommend people take a look at?
Oh,
I've
there
thrown
are
a
so
question in
many.
there, didn't I?
The well
Yeah.
Other books. So The Art of Influencing, also,
Mm-hmm.
I found that
Yeah.
beautiful. It's an
Yeah.
intense book, uh, but it's really like, because the thing about marketing books, you think it's just a lot of theoretical stuff or things like.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely not. There's much more behind
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
There it's
Well, the good ones, anyway. I mean, there's a lot of marketing books out there. Not all of them are excellent. So I think the
Yeah,
good
no,
ones,
that's true.
yeah, have that real life. Yeah, I mean, I'm getting sidetracked because I could talk about marketing books probably all afternoon, and both of us have got other things to do. So, um, where we met was through the Next Web event in Amsterdam. It
Yeah.
happened a couple of weeks ago. I was on panel, but what was your reaction of the whole event? I mean, the Next Web, for people that don't know it, because I have a lot of listeners in the US, it's quite a
Mm,
huge deal in Europe, isn't it? It's
yeah.
usually a massive event, 15,000 people normally, and normally quite a big event. And they obviously stopped it for COVID and then brought it back this year. What did you think?
So, as always, there were great talks, great
Hmm.
speakers, super inspiring and interesting. Sometimes a bit scary, especially those talking about the future and AI, how they would
Mm.
take over the human race, and be
Yeah,
careful. And you were like, okay. And then
yeah,
actually, what's funny is that a week after, there was the Instagram down, Facebook down,
yeah,
and
yeah.
WhatsApp down. And in a way, I thought about that talk, and I was like, it's happening already.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
So I'm like, they're already here, you know.
yeah,
But
yeah,
then after a few hours, everything was fine. So maybe
yeah,
that was I was overthinking it. But yeah, great talks. For sure, it was something different than it used to be in the past, in a way that probably that's the case in many other circumstances right now. But it was like being back in normal life, but in a different normality. So it was quite different, like back to normal, but a different normal.
Yeah. And what do you think as a marketer about getting back to events? Because I mean, my sound probably sounds a bit weird to my listeners right now because I'm not in my home studio. I'm in Barcelona, so I'm traveling. I went to a meeting and was in real life with a whole bunch of people and stuff like that. And we were both in Amsterdam at the same time. It's weird, isn't it?
It is. It's beautiful. It's amazing that we're able to do that again. But for sure, it still feels weird that that's possible. When you think that just a few months ago, we were still wearing masks and we had to maintain distance, and now being all together in the same room. But I also think it's fundamental that we, little by little, of course, people that feel comfortable should do it. People that still don't, it's totally fine. They should take their own time. But as for marketers, it's fundamental to participate at events. For me, events have always been a way to networking, to make new friendships even, and meet new people. And like I mentioned before, I produce a podcast, and also, I mean, in other circumstances when I had to write blogs and I was looking for guest writers, and in other circumstances in general when I was looking for mentors for myself, having that network that I was able to create thanks to events was fundamental. So I mean, I'm a big fan of events, and I'm really a person, a people person. So I really love and enjoy being in crowded places where I can meet so many people from all over the world. So actually, for me, COVID was a big thing that I couldn't do that. But
so your
I got
advice
used to it.
your advice to marketers right now, if they're looking at their budgets, they should start getting back into events, start investing back into events, and they'll get bigger. I think the next web next year is going to be back to its normal size, isn't it? Like 15,000 people. I think, was it like 5,000 people there this year? Or something
and I think it was mostly Europe focused. And normally there would be many more guests from outside. Like guest wise, of course, there were guests from the US as well, but they couldn't travel here, so it wasn't the same.
It was they were virtual. They were very careful about COVID. They had all the bracelets and stuff, so it was quite interesting, wasn't it? So, but and aside from the scary part of the AI and the fact that we were all there from a COVID perspective, was there anything else that you picked up from the event that that helped you? When you got back to the office?
Well, definitely the energy, the willingness that people have of connecting again, of being there again, of sharing a drink and talking about business or not, being able. I met people that I saw. I caught up with people that I hadn't seen for 2 years almost, and it was so funny because like our lives changed so much. Like I grew in my role, and other businesses also grew. And another friend I met there, actually his business was going really bad at some point after COVID, and now is coming back up and actually even growing and flourishing. So I think that's beautiful, and it's a reason for feeling grateful and even more inspired to keep growing and looking at the future and not looking back, because what's back? It's the past.
Yeah, that's a nice thought. I'm going to get to our final question then, talking about looking back, because when we were preparing for this, you didn't even know that rock stars used to throw things into the
didn't.
which probably tells you something about...
I was shocked. I was like, really?
Yeah, I mean, there was a rock star that actually parked his car in a swimming pool. So there's this thing. So anyway, so we have this regular feature on Rockstar CMO called the Rockstar CMO Swimming Pool, which is our portal to hell for all the overhyped trends, bullshit and snake oil that seems to plague the profession we love. What would you throw into our Rockstar CMO Swimming Pool?
Yeah, so I love this question, and I love the fact that I had to look it up and see what it was. But definitely I would throw in the pool those posts or pieces of content that say, than things that successful marketers, successful entrepreneurs have to do in order to become the number one entrepreneur in the world, or like to become like Elon Musk or whatever. And I hate that because, well, first of all, success is something that everyone has a different definition of success. That's a first. Second thing is that everyone has their own method. They have their own way of working, of being successful, and making the most out of their day. For instance, some people may need to sleep till noon, but then they can easily work until 5 a.m. And other people, instead, they need to wake up at 5 a.m. and then go to bed at 8. And who am I, or who is anybody else to say which method works best? At the end, the result matters, right? So if the end result is still successful, the method, it really depends on the person. Of course, there are certain things like exercising and sleeping well and eating well, but that's something that is good for everybody, for any human being to live a nice life, right?
Absolutely.
But all those things that make you believe if you start doing these, you can become that. It's a bit too extreme. I don't like that.
But it's part of that hustle culture that we live in these days, isn't it? And do you think that, from your perspective, and you were giving advice to young marketers just a moment ago, do you think that there's a lot of pressure on people now to look at those blog posts and to sort of think about the habits they need to have?
There is, for sure, because we constantly get those posts or blogs talking about how can you become a successful marketing manager, how can you grow in your career, how can you and this is one of the, I would say, the downsides of social media, of all these digital communications. And what happens is that this brings us away from the now and from the who we are and the now, because each one of us has their own path and their own timing and their own way of doing things. And so reading all these things make you feel you're doing it wrong, because whatever you do, even if you're the best marketer or whatever, if you read these, you feel like you're the worst, because maybe you tick 1 out of the 10 boxes. So these things should be seen as food for thought, for sure, like a way of thinking, okay, I didn't think about this, maybe I should start and try for myself, but still stay truthful to yourself and think about your own path and stay focused on that. That would be my advice.
I love it. And it's very similar to something a previous guest, Amber Osborne, threw into the swimming pool, which was shit other marketers advise me on the internet. So that's a really good idea. So that's definitely going in the pool. And then so over to you. So if people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you, Ilaria?
You can find me on LinkedIn as Ilaria Severi. You'll see I mention my work and my podcast. You can find me as the host of CC Talks, as well as the producer. And you can always email me at ilaria.severi@creativeclicks.com, or just send me a direct message on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining me, and thanks for putting up with some of my logistics issues as I've been traveling. So thank you for
No problem. Me. Thank you so much. It's been fun.
Thank you very much. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ilaria. Some great advice for young marketers there. I could talk about marketing books all day, and chucking those hustle lists into the pool, absolutely. I will, of course, include all of her links, including to her agency and their podcast, in the show notes. Okay, it's that time of the week again. Time for a cocktail with my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose, in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Hello, and welcome to the bar. Great to see you here. It's also really interesting that here in the bar we have, is this a carnival that you've got going on here? It's really, I'm struck by how many things there are, rides and vendor games and all sorts of things. Anyway, We
It's
are
bigger than
here.
it looks, this virtual bar, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very, very big bar. I mean, yeah, goodness gracious. Anyway,
I'll ask
welcome
him
to the
pipe
bar.
down so we can chat.
Yes. So we've got a fun one tonight. So so I'm assuming that
Yes.
you have spent a Sunday morning or two sipping on a Bloody Mary.
Oh, yes.
And do you know the history of the Bloody Mary?
No, I don't.
It's actually a really interesting quick history here, which was there was a bar in Paris called Harry's New York Bar. So it was a U.S. themed bar, New York themed anyway, in Paris, very famous bar. It was a great hangout for Ernest Hemingway and others. And they invented a number of cocktails there. And they invented this one that they called the Bucket of Blood, which just lovely sounding. And it was basically tomato juice and vodka. And they started, refining it, changing it, working on it, et cetera. And of course, one of the very first mentions of it was in the bar. They were writing up the bar about Paris and all the cocktails that they'd made. And they said basically this new drink, which is receiving all sorts of buzz and attention from the town's writers, is called a Bloody Mary. And it's half tomato juice and half vodka, which sounds,
Oh my God.
at its heart, sounds nasty. But of course, it has been refined over time, and everybody has their own Bloody Mary recipe.
Yeah.
For horseradish or no horseradish, or build a salad and put bacon in it and have a hamburger on top of it, or whatever it is. So this is my take, and I've never liked the term bloody. I've never liked it, which made me go learn about the history. I've never liked the name Bloody Mary as the drink. I love the drink, didn't really care for the name. So I took a bit of a left turn here and said, what if we made something like a Bloody Mary, but didn't call it a Bloody Mary, but we made it with a Reposado tequila instead? And it works brilliantly. And we're going to call it the Sunday Rise and Shine.
I love it. But you can't. I mean, the nice thing about a Bloody Mary is the world has pretty much accepted you're allowed to drink those in the morning.
That's right.
By swapping it out and having tequila in the morning, has anything changed?
That's right. It's great. It actually works really lovely. The agave fruits and the taste of the tequila really works with the tomato juice and with anything else. The horseradish, if you choose to do that, and all the classic makings of a Bloody Mary, and it works brilliantly. So the Sunday Rise and Shine. We're not calling this a Bloody Mary. We're calling this a Sunday Rise and Shine, and it is basically your favorite Bloody Mary sort of recipe. Mine is very simple. It's basically tomato juice and tequila and a little black pepper, add a little spice, and and away you go, right? And I don't and piece of celery in it if you want for a stir stick, but nothing, no big salad or anything on the top of it.
Does celery serve any other purpose than a stir stick?
That's right. None, zero. I'm generally against celery as a concept.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's not bad as a stick, is it? I mean, it does quite a good job being a stick. But
that's right.
I'm going to load my glass up with some ice. I can't remember if you do that with a Bloody Mary, do you?
Yes. Well.
And again this week, the nice thing about our agreement here, and if I look at what I have on my desktop bar, is I do actually have some of that very light tequila that we discussed last week, Hendrick's Gin. So pop some of that into the glass. Oh, that's a nice Sunday morning I'm putting in there, I'll tell you. I'll probably still be feeling this Sunday morning, carry on like that.
There you go.
And I don't have any tomato juice or pepper or a celery stick or horseradish.
Right. So,
or any of the other ingredients.
I'll bet you have a substitute for it, though.
I certainly do, sir. I certainly do. And I shall be slogging in some nice Indian tonic water, which I think, due to its health properties, when one's out there and trying not to contract malaria, that's what tonic helps you with, doesn't it?
Indeed.
I think same as tomato juice, really, with its vitamin C. Let me give this a taste. Oh, that. I would rise and shine for one of those, my friend. I really would.
Would you really? All right.
In fact, I would drink one every week. That's how good
you
that
probably
is.
should. Yeah, you probably should drink one each and every week. Yes.
And what did you call yours?
I call this the Sunday Rise and Shine.
I'm just drinking a Friday's Rise and Shine.
Yeah.
And while we're rising and shining, I assume it's easy like a Sunday morning. Can't stop dropping that in. Whereabouts are we drinking these?
Well, I think we have to go to Paris for this, right? I mean, we're going to have to celebrate the Harry's New York Bar, and go to Paris for, to basically show them the new version of this as well. And by the way, this still exists, right? The Harry's New York Bar still exists.
Really? I wonder what they say when you go in there and say, "Can I have your most famous drink, please? But I've changed all the ingredients."
Yeah.
My good man.
I'm sure, being French, they're totally open to the idea, right?
Oh, they are. They are some of the most open people when it comes to changing anything culinary.
Absolutely, yes. And if you do so in a Texas accent or something very American, they're just even more likely to want to change, right?
Mate, your Cowboys baseball cap, I think, is...
Yes, exactly. I ain't going to speak your French language, but I will ask you to change.
I'm not even going to try and do your accent, but that sounds fantastic. So once we've finished arguing with the barman, as he grumpily goes and finds a nice tequila to put in your drink, what will we be chatting about in Paris?
Well, this is something I was talking with a friend about last week. So do you know Seinfeld? Yes, the TV series, right? So are you a fan of Seinfeld?
Oh yes, yes. I'm not like a super fan. I'm aware of the works and watched many episodes, and I've actually lived one of the Seinfeld episodes where he doesn't get a rental car twice in my life. You have the reservation.
That's right. It's the importance of holding the reservation. Exactly. Well, there's another one. There's another episode that has just as famous a scene, I think. Anyway, and it's where Kramer decides that he's going to start his own version of the movie phone service, right? And so, if you don't remember the movie phone service because you're not old like me, there was a thing where you could actually phone up and press in the dial keys, the movies, and get times and theaters and listings and all of that to get, to the movie that you wanted to go see. Yeah. And so he decides to do that. And in the scene, George ends up calling the number, and Kramer answers with the "Hello and welcome to Movie Phone. Using the touch tone keys on your phone, please enter the first 3 letters of the movie you'd like to see." And of course, George dutifully pushes the 3 numbers on his phone, but Kramer can't understand what those dial tones mean. And he goes, "You've selected Agent Zero?" And now George, of course, is completely confused and goes, What are you talking about? And then Kramer panics and guesses again. "You've selected Brown-Eyed Girl." And then there's this awkward silence because, of course, that's not what he selected. And finally, Kramer bursts out with one of my favorite all-time lines. And he goes, "Why don't you just tell me the name of the movie you'd like to see?" And so it's so funny. But what it reminds me of, and why I found myself quoting that scene, was I was talking to a friend, and it's like, it's this line that we wish we could sometimes just ask our audiences, right? As we're building our blog or our website or our resource center or our event or whatever. It's like, God, I wish the audience would just tell us what they want, right?
Yeah.
And here's the spoiler alert. This is what I've learned over 10 years. Your audience doesn't know what they want. And we've done tons of audience research for clients, and we've learned that after doing this research, they will tell you. If you ask them what they want, right, they'll tell you. But what they usually do is they'll frame it in the form of a problem that they should want the answer to. In other words, it's usually something the audience thinks they should want the answer to, but they don't actually need. The classic example of this, of course, is the quote that Henry Ford never said, of course, which is, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have replied faster horses. That's the answer. That's I should want this, but I don't really know, right? I don't really know what they want. And so, in other words, like you might go, well, what do I want out of my blog? And I might get an answer like, I've got a problem selling content marketing to my boss. And so I would dutifully respond with a post on how to solve the content marketing business case, but that's not answering what they really need. That's not differentiating me. A bit like we talked about last week, it's basically just answering the question that everybody else is going to be answering.
Right.
And so it's what they don't know, right? What they want is often what they don't know. And that doesn't mean you don't listen or you ask. It just means that when they tell you what they want, you need to start to dig deeper and really understand what it is they actually want. And what you want, what you as the creator, the content creator, is for them to get to the end of your piece, whatever it is, your blog post, your video, your resource center, your white paper, and go, God, I'd never thought of it that way, or I never knew that that was an option.
Absolutely.
And the funny thing is, the punchline to all of that is that Kramer in the Seinfeld episode does exactly that, right? He delivers this differentiation completely by accident, by misunderstanding the dial tones. He solves the problem in a really innovative way. He just basically says, why don't you just tell me the name of the movie you'd like to see? Sort of giving him this voice-activated service. Yeah. And then at the end of the episode, it's classic because he's still doing it. And the guy at the very end of the episode, somebody knocks on his door and goes, hello, and welcome to your worst nightmare, Cosmo Kramer, apartment 5E. You've been stealing my business. It's the movie phone guy coming to exact revenge. So the whole thing is we can't really know an audience until we listen to their needs, but you can't give them what they want until you create the thing that they don't know that they need. And that's just a lesson that I think is worth learning.
Yeah, and so related to what we were talking about last week as well, isn't it? Because we tend to pile on as content marketers, solving or answering the question that we think that they need right now. But actually, the way to differentiate would be to explore the problem that they don't know they have yet.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. It's to it's to deliver them the iPhone that they have no idea exists yet, right?
Yeah. And how do you see, you work with clients all the time, and luckily today we've got a couple of minutes, and I'd like to ask you this question. How do you see clients doing this sort of thing? I mean, it's something you obviously encourage. How do you see them thinking differently like that?
The way that we like to prescribe to do it is to start to think about your content as a product, right? Yeah. So in other words, if you were going to introduce product into the marketplace, you would never go, well, let's just do everything else everybody else is doing, right? Let's just provide the same features, copycat features. Yeah, ours will be a little prettier. Ours will be a little, different colors. You would never do that as a product manager, because you'd realize that, quite frankly, I can deliver that, that duplicate of a BlackBerry or that duplicate of a flip phone. And it's not going to be any different. I might market it a little better. I might have a bit of a better brand, but I'm not really answering what the customer really needs with this product. And so understanding, and, we love design thinking or the jobs to be done framework, or there's a number of ways to get to this idea in terms of how the methodology is. But at its core, it's looking at your content as important as one of your products and services. So how are you differentiating that product? Yeah. Right. So it's not just differentiating your product through the marketing, but it's differentiating your marketing as a product. Yeah. And that if you can start to think about it that way, it just changes the way that you think about the content that you're creating.
Yeah, and I mean the sea of content that particularly in B2B that people are, and as you say that as you, I mean, keep referring to last week, but as you said last week, people on this sort of hamster wheel of research that are, and they're just consuming more and more and more. Something like that is going to stand right out, isn't it? And it's going to stop them. They're going to go, wow, yeah.
It is, and it's going to give you ultimately, better insight, right, into what is really going on with your customers, and and hopefully, if you do it well, it aligns and adds to the experience of the product or service that you sell. In other words, if I deliver you thought leadership, or if I deliver you content that inspires, that you get to the end of it and the audience goes, wow, I never looked at it that way. Yeah. Now you take that perception in the customer's mind to your product, because where their imagination goes is, wow, they showed me something that I didn't know about in a different way. And now when I look at their product, it looks at its surface like all the rest of the products, and it may be, quite frankly, but the question is going to be in their head, but is it? Because they showed me this other thing in a completely different way. I'll bet you the product matches that promise as well. So you're sort of teeing up the idea that your product is actually different because your content and your marketing is actually different.
Well, I also think that that really the amount of research that particularly in B2B buyer can do is quite shallow in terms of deep features and functions. And what they're going to pick up from something like that is you as a partner to work with, and the trust that in the research they haven't got time to do, if you like. It's like, I can't measure every single feature function across 5 different vendors, but these guys look like guys I can trust, and I believe that in 3 years' time they're going to be with me with whatever that problem is then.
Yeah, and interestingly, I think there's also a tension there, right? Which you as a marketer or as a storyteller or as a content practitioner, you can play with, which is inherent in that is because, so just think about it in the metaphor of the iPhone, right? So if Steve Jobs comes out on stage and says, here's something you never knew you wanted before, right? Here's something completely different.
Yeah.
Part of the reason that it is something that we trust is because it's obviously Apple giving it to us, right?
Yeah.
In other words, if it's some schmuck off the street who says, hey, here's something you never knew you wanted before, this is an iPhone, you kind of look at it side-eyed and go, I don't necessarily, I mean, it's cool what you're showing me, but I don't really trust you that you're actually doing
especially
this.
At those prices.
There is a tension there with leading with something that is truly giving them something differentiated, and the trust that you either have or have spoiled with regard to your current, either the content brand or the brand itself. And so it's something that you can play with, right? Which is, it's the equivalent of saying, hey, here's something that you never, that you would have never expected us to give you, and you never knew you wanted.
Yeah.
But then you've got to back it up, right? Then you've got to be able to back that up with the other kinds of content that we so often talk about, that says, hey, here's the stuff to allay your fear about why we're, we are the way we are, or why, what our history is, or what, why other people trust us, and all those kinds of things. So, balance it, right? You've got to balance what you're doing here, and think in the same way that Apple does, right? Apple does, standard stuff too, right? Partnerships with, big technology, telecommunications firms. They do, all their standard stuff. And then they also introduce that weird and innovative stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Robert. I love that thought. And if people are looking for weird and innovative stuff, and they're looking for a .NET website, for example, where would they go?
Well, they'll find us on our little website where we sort of put up all our stuff. It's just contentadvisory.net.
That's fantastic. And when the listener spins the dial on the interweb and they want to find you, where will they find you?
TikTok usually. Yeah, I'm a big I'm big on TikTok these days. Yeah. Of course, all the usual suspects: Twitter, LinkedIn.
I actually installed TikTok because of the news.
I'm addicted to TikTok. I'll tell you right now, I'm addicted to it. I love it.
Yeah, well, they're selling their algorithm. I think I learned that from your podcast, and my God, they've got that down, haven't they? So that's
it's really annoying how habitual it gets.
But we won't see you on there. You're just a consumer.
Yeah, that's correct. You won't see me. You won't see me on the TikTok doing any videos or any of my lip syncing. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. And will I see you in the bar next week?
Well, of course you will.
Well, I hope it's a bit quieter, but yes, I look forward to them. Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Robert. Wise words. And listeners, I have no idea what sound effect he's going to suggest next. So that's a wrap on episode 84 of the Rockstar CMO Effing Marketing Podcast. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks again to Jeff, Ilaria, and Robert for joining me and for sharing their insight. You can find all their links and the topics we discussed in the show notes, and please check out their work and follow them. You can find the show notes on your favourite podcast app or at rockstarcmo.fm, where you can also find all our previous episodes. And thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track, and driving along with us. Let us know what you think. We are, of course, Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn. You can leave a rating or review in your favourite podcatcher, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, as you heard, Jeff is taking a week off. I'll be chatting with Christopher Willis, CMO of Acrolinx, and Robert Rose will be in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you'll join us here next week at Rockstar CMO FM.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.